Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। श्रीगीताज्ञानम्। ॐ पार्थाय प्रतिबोधितां भगवता नारायणेन स्वयं व्यासेन ग्रथितां पुराणमुनिना मध्ये महाभारतम् अद्वैतामृतवर्षिणी भगवती अष्टादशाध्यायिनी अम्ब त्वामनुसन्दधामि भगवद्गीते भवद्वेषिणी। नमोऽस्तु ते व्यासविशालबुद्धे फुल्लारविन्दायतपत्रनेत्रा येन त्वया भारततैल्यपूर्णः प्रज्वालितो ज्ञानमयप्रदीपः प्रपन्नपारिजाताय स्तोत्रवैत्रैकपाणये ज्ञानमुद्राय कृष्णाय गीतामृतदुहे नमः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो भोक्ता गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्ससुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्। वसुदेवसुतं देवं कंसचाणूरमर्दनं देवकी परमानन्दं कृष्णं वन्दे जगद्गुरुं। भीष्मद्रोणतटा जयद्रथजला गान्धारनीलोत्पला शल्यग्राहवती कृपेण वहनी कर्णेन वेलाकुला अश्वत्थामविकर्णघोरमकरा दुर्योधनावर्तिनी सोतीर्णा खलु पाण्डवैरननदी कैवर्तककेशवः पाराशद्यवचः सरोजममलं गीतार्थगण्डोत्कटं नानाख्यानककेसरं हरिकथा सम्बोधनाभूदितं। लोके सज्जनषट्परैरहरः पीपीयमानं मुदा भूयाद् भारतपङ्कजं कलिमलप्रध्वंसिन श्रेयसे। मूकं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम्। यं ब्रह्मा वरुणेन्द्ररुद्रमरुतः तुन्वन्ति दिव्यैस्तवैः वेदैः साङ्गपदक्रमोपनिषदे गायन्ति यं सामगाः। ध्यानावस्थिततद्गतेन मनसा पश्यन्ति यं योगिनो यस्यान्तं न विदुः सुरासुरगणा देवाय तस्मै नमः। देवाय तस्मै नमः। देवाय तस्मै नमः।
Hari Om. So, welcome to our 100th Satsang. And we are continuing with chapter 18. Good to be back home in India. And hope to continuously, every Saturday work on it and finish the Bhagavad Gita. Hopefully, there won't be any other gaps. So, Bhagavan talked about Jnanam, Karma, and Karta. Jnanam is the knowledge, the overall understanding, which is part of karma chodana and the impulse to action. Karma is the basis of action through which results are obtained, and it is part of karma sangraha. And karta is the one who has the jnanam and does the karma, the jivatman. And this jivatman is part of, or as parigyata, is part of the former, which is the karma chodana, and as the karta is part of the latter, which is karma sangraha. And these are the three that are under the influence of the gunas, which are the human nature, the sattvika, rajasika, and tamasika guna. And the knowledge by which Bhagavan then classifies jnanam into the sattvika, rajasika, and tamasika divisions, the threefold divisions. The knowledge by which one sees in all beings that supreme, immutable, single presence, undivided in the divided. That is sattvika jnanam or sattvika knowledge. But that knowledge which sees in all beings the various kinds of distinct entities, the variety in the creation, because of their individuality, because they appear different. That kind of a knowledge is Rajasika. And that knowledge which clings to one single act, as if it were the whole, without any reason, without any meaning, and insignificant, is Tamasic knowledge. And then Bhagavan also classified action as Sattvic, Rajasic, and Tamasic, and said that that obligatory action which is done without attachment, without likes or dislikes, and by one who is not seeking fruits of the action that are being performed or that have been performed, is Sattvika knowledge. But in contrast, that action which is performed by one seeking to fulfill desires, prompted by the ego, by the sense of individuality, by the sense of I am the one who is performing the action, that sense of I, and what am I going to get from it? And then because of this, that very action becomes a source of strain. That kind of an action is Rajasic action. And that action which is undertaken with delusion, without regard to consequence of what is going to happen, without regard to the loss, the injury, and also without regard to one's own capacity, is Tamasic action or karma. And while the knowledge triad that we saw impels us into action, the triad of action is the basis for the very action itself. The Atman itself is free from action, as much as it is free of the gunas. Now, how is it that the karta is influenced by the gunas? Bhagavan takes that up now. We will see that in the next verse. But a quick reminder that the threefold descriptions of nature, they are not meant to classify other people, other human beings, but to help us become aware of our own nature and to grow from a spiritual perspective. That is the reason why we study these. So with that, let us continue to verse 26.
Mukta sango naham vadi.
Mukta sango naham vadi.
Dhrityutsaha samanvitaha.
Dhrityutsaha samanvitaha.
Siddhya siddhyor nirvikaraha.
Siddhya siddhyor nirvikaraha.
Karta sattvika uchyate.
Karta sattvika uchyate.
Mukta sango naham vadi. Dhrityutsaha samanvitaha. Siddhya siddhyor nirvikaraha. Karta sattvika uchyate.
Karta, the doer. Mukta sangaha, free from attachment. Sangha, attachment, mukta, free from. Anahamvadi, without any personal glorification. Samanvitaha, endowed with. Dhrityutsaha, dhriti and utsaha. Dhrityutsaha, perseverance, dhriti, and utsaha or enthusiasm. Nirvikaraha, unaffected, without any change, without any vikara. Siddhya siddhyaha, by success or by failure. Uchyate is called satvika. Satvik. So Bhagavan is saying that the doer who is free from attachment, not seeking personal glorification, endowed with perseverance and enthusiasm, unaffected by success and failure, is called satvika. Karta satvika uchyate. Such a doer is called satvika. And Bhagavan lists out 4 qualities to describe this kind of a doer. See, for any person to have these qualities, that the person who is an agent of action, or the person who is actually performing the action, the doer, the karta, the only way is to devote the work to a higher ideal. Only then these qualities will be there. The Ishvara Arpana Buddhi that we have talked about so much. The person's entire body, mind and intellect, all the faculties are devoted to the higher. And it is nothing but an instrument to carry out the work for the higher, for the supreme. Like Roger Federer said at his retirement, right? It was not supposed to be like this. Only tennis matters. For him, the higher ideal was tennis. And what are the qualities that Bhagavan lists out, which such a person demonstrates? Those are the first one is Mukta Sangaha, free from attachment. Even when the world is celebrating, even when the world is putting this person on a pedestal, the person sincerely feels, not for saying it to the world, sincerely, the person through his entire body, mind and intellect, because the body, mind and intellect is attuned to the higher ideal, to the supreme, the person sincerely feels that he or she has not done anything spectacular. And this can happen only because the ego is completely in tune, completely aligned, completely devoted to the supreme higher ideal. The second quality is anahamvadi, glorification, without that sense of individuality, not projecting oneself. See, one of the sights that was to see in this retirement ceremony of Federer was that of Rafael Nadal, the competitor of Federer for so many years, for almost 2 decades, if I'm not wrong. He was in tears. And the rivalry amongst these two has been probably the most fiercest in the world of tennis. And here was this great champion Nadal, who has won even more titles in terms of Grand Slam than Roger Federer, representing an epitome of humility, celebrating his toughest and greatest rival. That is anahamvadi, no personal glorification involved. Even when these guys win, you see that, right? And you can see this across the society in various fields. But this is the kind of behavior that depicts an anahamvadi, or for that matter, a mukta sangha. And then dhrityutsaha samanvitaha. Samanvitaha means endowed with dhriti and utsaha, perseverance and enthusiasm. There is a beautiful story that depicts this. Around 5:30 p.m. on December 10th, 1914, there was a massive explosion in New Jersey. And the legendary inventor, Thomas Edison, his plant was engulfed in flames. And it was a chemical inferno. And because of that, it was basically impossible to put out. And Thomas's son, Charles Edison, he recollected that his father said in a childlike voice, "Go and fetch your mother, call her." She would have never seen a fire like this in her life before. See, look at the enthusiasm at his factory burning down, multiple factories, right? And when Charles protested, Thomas Edison said, "See, Charles, all our mistakes have been burnt. Let us start afresh." And with a small loan from a good friend of his, who happens to be Henry Ford, or happened at that time, Edison started again. And one interesting thing is that he did not fire even one of his employees, despite such a big loss. So what does this indicate? Dhriti is forbearance, fortitude, perseverance even in the face of difficulties, even in the face of obstacles, challenges. And the other is utsaha, which is enthusiasm. Enthusiasm within oneself and aspect of being inspiration for others. So this obviously would have been so much inspiring for his employees, right? Samanvitaha, endowed with. Being endowed with these is like we used to say in the army, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. Samanvitaha. And siddhya siddhyor nirvikaraha. 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 Vikaraha means modifications, change. Nir means no change at all. No change in siddhi or asiddhi. Whether there is success or whether there is failure, the person is balanced. The mind does not get carried away by either of those. For those whose minds get carried away, when there is success, tremendous elation. When there is failure, tremendous dejection. A classic example of this is Sri Rama. He was asked to get ready for being coronated as the king. And the evening, the day was, penultimate day was spent in all of that, being decked up and, everything was decorated, all the jewelry and everything was up there for everyone to see. And then the next morning, the morning of the coronation, he was sent to the forest in his loincloth. So he had to leave everything. Siddhya siddhyor nirvikaraha. And he was absolutely balanced in both those extremes, in either of those extremes. And what do we celebrate as auspiciousness in Sri Rama? It is the fact of what he did as a karta with all these qualities, the sattvika qualities. That is what has to be celebrated and worshipped as auspicious. And how is this possible? This is possible when the person is in love only with the performance itself and not for the outcome. Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda was asked, when he was getting old, he was asked what would happen to this Chinmaya mission, after you are gone. So a very tough and rough question, right? And his response was, I did not build anything. So the question was, what would happen to this mission that you have built? And his response was, I did not build anything. You built it. He built it through you. He referring to the Supreme. He built it through you. And much after his life, we are thankfully reading what he has taught. So this verse will be the sadhana for chapter 18. Being a sattvika karta. See, we have to be karta. There is no choice for us. We are all kartas. All creation, Bhagavan has said, have to perform action. There is no choice. By our nature, we are impelled into action. So trying to perform whatever we have to perform, trying to tune our actions to be sattvika, meaning trying to tune our actions to have these four qualities. Mukta sangaha, which is free from attachment. Anahamvadi, without any personal glorification. Dhrityutsaha samanvita, endowed with dhriti and utsaha, endowed with perseverance or fortitude and enthusiasm. And siddhya siddhyoho nirvikaraha, being balanced in success and in failure. That is the sadhana for this chapter. Let us now see what is Rajasika Karta.
Ragi karma phala pripsuhu.
Ragi karma phala pripsuhu.
Lubdo himsatmako shuchihi.
Lubdo himsatmako shuchihi.
Harsha shokanvita karta.
Harsha shokanvita karta.
Rajasa parikirtitaha.
Rajasa parikirtitaha.
Ragi karma phala pripsuhu. Lubdo himsatmako shuchihi. Harsha shokanvita karta. Rajasa parikirtitaha.
Ragi, the passionate. karma phala prepsuhu, always seeking karma phala, always seeking the fruit of the action. Lubdaha, meaning greedy. Himsatmakaha, harmful. Ashuchihi, impure. Harsha shokan vitaha, full of elation and dejection. Karta, such a doer, parikirtitaha, is called rajasa, rajasika. So Bhagavan is saying passionate, ever seeking fruit, greedy, harmful, impure, full of elation and dejection. Such a doer is called rajasika. A person who is full of desires and passion, that is a ragi. Always seeking result or fruit, that is karma phala prepsuhu. And whatever is gained seems less. So while performing the action, I want this, want that sense of wanting all the time. And then the wanting is obtained, oh, it's so less, I need more. So this insatiable desire leads to mounting greed, lubdaha. And such a person then has a nature of causing pain to other creatures. And proudly announces that also, himsatmakaha. It is like one of those greedy managers in corporate, right? The greedy manager wants more and more and more, never satisfied with the result, and thereby causes pain to the employees, to his own team members. Pain in terms of demanding more and more from them at their personal discomfort. So himsatmakaha, that's one example, by the way, there are so many. There is no hesitation to harm, injure, or even kill another being, another creature, as long as selfish goals and desires are met. This kind of immoral existence then leads to an impure mind intellect, ashuchi. And that kind of a person experiences the seesaw. So whenever things are going one's way, there is tremendous elation. Whenever things are not going one's way, there is tremendous dejection. It is based on the outcome of the actions. Harsha shokan vitaha. And such a doer, Bhagavan says, is rajasika. Qualities, if present within us, we must try to eschew, we must try to reduce, must be controlled, must be curbed. Not controlled, must be curbed. And the tamasic karta, ayukta, next verse.
Ayukta prakrita stabdaha.
Ayukta prakrita stabdaha.
Shato naishkritiko lasaha.
Shato naishkritiko lashaha.
Vishadi dirgha sutri cha.
Vishadi dirgha sutri cha.
Karta tamasa uchyate.
Karta tamasa uchyate.
Ayukta prakrita stabdaha. Shato naishkritiko lasaha. Vishadi dirgha sutri cha. Karta tamasa uchyate.
Ayuktaha, unqualified. Prakritaha, unrefined. Stabdaha, stubborn. Shataha, corrupt. Naishkritaha, malicious. Alasaha, lazy. Vishadi, despondent. Cha, and dirgha sutri, procrastinating. Karta, such a doer. Tamasic uchyate, is said to be tamasic. So Bhagavan is saying unqualified, unrefined, stubborn, corrupt, malicious, lazy, despondent, and procrastinating. So I think there are 8 of these. Such a doer is said to be tamasic. Karta tamasa uchyate. He lists out 8 qualities that define such a person. And qualities, if detected by us in ourselves, we must discard. These must be discarded. It is like Hanuman, in the story where he crosses the ocean, the last obstacle which is pulling him towards the bed of the ocean, there's no thought, just kills it, picks up his mace and immediately gets rid of it. So must be discarded. What are these qualities? Ayuktaha, one who is unqualified, one who does not know how to practice a spiritual path. And because of this, indulges in activities that are lacking in control. Cannot control oneself. See, oftentimes we will see that a level of spiritual involvement helps us control ourselves. The reins are within our control. It's not as if the horse is running free, amok, without any control by the charioteer. And this person who is ayuktaha is also unsteady. Animal impulses dominate in such a person. Prakritaha is one who shows unrefined behavior, uncultured in conduct. We also see this in society enough around us. Stabdaha is, even when it is obvious and it is pointed out by well-wishers, this person is obstinate, extremely stubborn, and thereby misses out on opportunities to correct oneself. Shataha, person becomes dishonest, deceitful, corrupt. Naishkritikaha means, because of all of these aspects which are already there in this person, the person willfully creates hatred and enmity among other people as well as among other creatures. Why I say creatures is because we have also seen people making animals fight. It's a sport. Making animals fight itself is a sport. So that kind of a hatred and enmity and competition to harm the other is created in other people. Alasaha, inclination to carry out what has been commenced. Something has been commenced already. That inclination to continue with that goes away. And the person becomes lazy and unproductive. It's like Arjuna entering the battlefield. He tells Krishna, Senyor Ubayor Madhye, Ratam Sthapay Me Achyuta. In the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita, right? Take me to the middle of the battlefield. So he has commenced it. He wants to get into this. And then what happens? The inclination disappears completely. Alasa. And such a person, if it continues, the person consumes on benevolence of others or cheats other people without any contribution from one's own side. The person is existing in society, right? So how does that person exist? The only way a alasic person can exist is through others' benevolence or by cheating. Vishadi, despondent, sad, morose, pessimist. The stamina and the vitality of the person are completely gone. Again, Arjuna in the beginning of Bhagavad Gita is a classic example. The vitality is missing, completely gone. Dirgha Sutri, the one who is procrastinator. Benumbed by the inner nature, which is what we have all described, the tamasic nature, the person becomes or develops an incapacity. The person does not have any capacity for decision making. And because of this problem of not being able to decide, and also the problem of lack of will, which we saw just now, right? The vitality is gone. The lack of will to execute, to carry out. Because these two are not there, the person procrastinates. Dirgha Sutri also means harboring a deep vengeance. Dirgha is vengeance for others, Sutra. That is also an interpretation of Dirgha Sutri. See, it's like a fisherman who casts the net in the ocean and catches fish. Some of the fish lay quiet. They just lie in the net till they die. Other fish, they stubbornly fight about. They try to become free. They attempt to escape, successful or unsuccessful, whatever it may be. And among those, a few of them manage to leap out of the net and they get to safety. They escape. Similarly, people of the world are of three sorts, says Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Those who make no effort for emancipation, the aspirants who seek self-deliverance, and the liberated Jivan Muktas that we have read about earlier. So those are the three types of people. Obviously, the tamasic type is one who makes no effort at all at emancipation. Now, Bhagavan comes to Buddhi and Dhriti. He classifies the three. Buddhi is the faculty of, choice, free will. And Dhriti is the ability to perceive. And why is Bhagavan taking a Buddhi and Dhriti? If you start looking at human psychology and behavior, you can list out so many aspects, right? Why is he taking these two? These are probably the most critical of human capacities. See, faculties that empower free will and perseverance. Buddhi empowers free will and Dhriti empowers perseverance. And both of these are vital instruments in terms of executing action. Without Buddhi and Dhriti, action is not going to happen. Or it will be like the tamasic kind of a. Even rajasic action needs, by the way, all of these actions need Buddhi and Dhriti. The tamasic Buddhi, tamasic Dhriti will cause that kind of an action. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy says that the term free will has emerged as the canonical designator for control over one's actions, unquote. And once an action is commenced, sticking to it or making corrections as appropriate requires fortitude, especially in the face of obstacles, especially like we saw in the Thomas Alva Edison's case, right? There was a huge obstacle. Especially in that situation, it requires that fortitude. Obstacles will be in life. You can't change it. They will be there. Growth and evolution take place in the furnace of obstacles. You go through that furnace like gold goes through that furnace, gets beaten up. Human beings need to go through that obstacles to experience growth and evolution. There is this beautiful prayer from the movie Lagan. And I want Amrita, thank God she's reached, a place where we can sing. Otherwise, I will be singing. So it's better that Amrita sings. It's a beautiful prayer from Lagan. Over to you.
जो सुनो तो कहे प्रभु जी हमारी है बिनती दुखी जन को धीरज दो हारे नहीं वो कभी दुख से तुम निर्बल को रक्षा दो रह पाए निर्बल सुख से भक्ति को शक्ति दो भक्ति को शक्ति दो जग के जो स्वामी हो इतनी तो अरज सुनो है पथ में अंधियारे दे दो वरदान में उजियारे
Palanhare. Beautiful prayer. So see, dukhi jan ko Prabhu ji hamari hai binti. Dukhi jan ko dheeraj do. Dheeraj is also dhriti, by the way, right? And they also say de do vardhan mein ujiyare. Ujiyare is light. Light comes from knowledge. We have seen lots of other examples also. Revelation, right? So free will and perseverance are empowered by buddhi and dhriti. And the former is an expression of jnana shakti, the power of knowledge, jnana. And the latter is an expression of kriya shakti, the power of action, karma. And then Bhagavan says in the next verse, we continue.
Buddhir vedam dhritischaiva
Buddhir bedam dhritischaiva
gunatastrividham shrunu
gunatastrividham shrinu
procyamanamasheshena
procyamanamasheshena
pritatvena dhananjaya
pritatvena dhananjaya
Buddhir vedam dhritischaiva gunatastrividham shrunu procyamanamasheshena pritatvena dhananjaya.
O Dhananjaya, he says, Shrinu, listen. Procyamanam, as I declare. Trividham, the threefold. Bhedam, division. Buddhe, of understanding. Cha, and dhritihi, of fortitude. Gunataha, according to the gunas. asheshena, fully, eva, as well as pritatvena, severally. So Bhagavan is saying, O Dhananjaya, listen as I declare. And what does he declare? The threefold division of understanding and of fortitude, according to the gunas, fully as well as severally. See, work, as we have seen, is constituted of three factors: knowledge or jnanam, action or karma, and the doer or karta. And each of these fall under the threefold classification of gunas. And underlying these are the two factors which are the fuel, which empower, which force, the fuel and the force for all sustained endeavors. Anything that sustained endeavors is what makes us and makes this creation what it is. And those two are buddhi and dhriti. And Bhagavan says, listen now, as I am going to describe this fully and severally, completely and individually in these three-fold classification. See, my brother had a comment that my mother, if she had been in the USA in her younger days, like he went, would have been a CEO. So when I read this, I thought that the reason must be because of strong buddhi and dhriti, a combination of sattvic and rajasic. But when I wrote this, I thought, hey, see, I am classifying my mother. That's not right. This knowledge is for us to learn our own classification, our own nature, not to be judgmental about others' nature. So Bhagavan will now come to buddhi and dhriti. So we start with buddhi, verse 30.
Pravritim cha nivrittim cha
Pravrittim cha nivrittim cha
karya karye bhaya bhaye
karya karye bhaya bhaye
bandham moksham cha ya veti
bandham moksham cha ya veti
buddhissa partha sattviki
buddhissa partha sattviki
pravritim cha nivrittim cha karya karye bhaya bhaye bandham moksham cha ya veti buddhissa partha sattviki.
ya that which veti knows, pravrittim action, cha nivrittim inaction, cha and karya karye what ought to be done and what ought not to be done. Karya, what ought to be done. Akarya is what ought not to be done. Bhaya bhaye, bhaya fever, abhaya fearlessness, fear and fearlessness. Bandham moksham, bandham bondage, moksham liberation. Sa that, buddhihi understanding, sattviki is sattvika. O Partha, O Arjuna. So Bhagavan says that which knows action and inaction, what ought to be done and ought not to be done, fear and fearlessness, bondage and liberation. That understanding is sattvika, O Arjuna. So buddhissa partha sattviki. That understanding is sattvika. Bhagavan gives 4 pairs, and buddhi, which is able to discriminate amongst these 4 pairs, not between them, amongst them, is the sattvika capable one. The first one is pravrittim and nivrittim, action and inaction, where one should act and where one should not, refrain from action. Actions that must be performed or pursued, and actions that must be shunned, stayed away from. See, Hanuman is a classic example for this. He knew when to engage, when to disengage. For example, in the story that I briefly talked, we have discussed the story earlier, so I'm not going to repeat today. It's already 5:40, right? So, but he knows when the demon is someone who should be destroyed versus when the demon should be someone who should be engaged with and escaped from. When to grow big, when to grow small. He had the power to grow big and he had the power to grow small. When should that be done? Another interpretation for pravritti is the path of samsara, or it's called pravritti marga, the path of entanglement with earthly life. And nivritti is the path of tyaga, renunciation. Nivritti marga, the path of letting go of earthly pleasures. And again, Hanuman is an epitome of Tyaga. The next is Karya Akarya. Karya, what ought to be done, Akarya, what ought not to be done. The capacity to discriminate between the right and the wrong. Sometimes we think that the wrong is the right, or the right is the wrong. So that capacity to discriminate. Bhaya, Abhaya, fear and fearlessness. We have heard this common saying, right? Fools tread in, or fools rush in where angels fear to tread. The right understanding is the capability to discriminate between what is to be feared and what is not to be feared. It is actually wrong action that should be feared. We are talking about karma, karta, right? In that sense, jnana. Wrong action is what should be feared. Fools rush in where angels fear to tread. And the fourth pair is bandham moksham. Bondage and liberation. Pravritti marga, akarya and bhaya, they lead to bandha or bondage. And nivritti marga, karya and abhaya, they lead to moksham or liberation. And what about rajasic and tamasic buddhi? Let's continue with the next verse.
Yaya dharmam adharmam cha
Yaya dharmam adharmam cha
karyam cha karyameva cha
karyam cha karyameva cha
ayatavat prajanati
ayathavat prajanati
buddhissa partha rajasi
buddhissa partha rajasi.
Yaya dharmam adharmam cha karyam cha karyameva cha ayathavat prajanati buddhissa partha rajasi.
Sa, that, buddhihi, buddhi. Yaya, which gives. Ayathavat, a distorted, prajanati, understanding. Dharmam, of dharma. Cha, and adharmam, of adharma. Cha, and eva, also. Karyam, what ought to be done. Cha, and akaryam, what ought not to be done. Rajasi is rajasic, partha, O partha. So Bhagavan is saying that buddhi which gives a distorted understanding of dharma and adharma, and also of what ought to be done and what ought not to be done, is rajasic, O partha. Just like a reflection in a disturbed water is distorted, the rajasic understanding is distorted in discrimination between the righteous and the unrighteous, as well as what should be done or what ought to be done and what ought not to be done. Duryodhana, he enticed Yudhishthira into gambling, and then he usurped the kingdom from the Pandavas. And all of this was based on a distorted view of dharma and adharma, and what ought to be done and what ought not to be done. Cheating, like we said earlier, right? Cheating somebody else of their kingdom, of what belongs to them. And the tamasic buddhi, in the next verse.
Adharmam dharmamitiya
Adharmam dharmamitiya
manyate tamasavrata
manyate tamasavrita
sarvarthan viparitamscha
sarvarthan viparitamscha
buddhissa partha tamasi.
buddhissa partha tamasi.
Adharmam dharmamitiya manyate tamasavrata sarvarthan viparitamscha buddhissa partha tamasi.
Iti, that, ya, which, tamasa vrita, enveloped in darkness, manyate, thinks, adharmam, of of adharma, dharmam as dharma. Adharma is thought of as dharma. Cha and viparitams, viparintah reverses sarvarthan, all values. Whatever values are there, just make it opposite. Sa, that, buddhihi, buddhi, tamasi is tamasic, O Partha. So that which enveloped in darkness thinks of adharma as dharma and reverses all values. That buddhi is tamasic, O Partha. See, this is a perverted understanding in which one regards good as bad and bad as good. It is actually a chronic misunderstanding. It is, you can't even call it a understanding. When it is pretty obvious what is good, that person, corruption is bad, but there are people who consider it as good and justify it. Perverted, that is a perverted understanding. Such a buddhi, it reverses all values. Our political class is a big example. There are infinite examples. And it has opposing view because the understanding is enveloped in darkness. Believing that it is the right understanding. So when you're completely in the dark, light is not obvious. Such a buddhi, it twists everything. There is a twisted view. So after discussing buddhi and its versions in terms of sattvic, rajasic and tamasic, Bhagavan now goes to dhriti, or fortitude or perseverance, as we have termed it in the context of the gunas. See, it is important to note that dhriti stands for fortitude or perseverance in all of them. There is sattvic dhriti, rajasic dhriti, tamasic dhriti. Sometimes we get confused, how can dhriti be tamasic? Any pursuit driven by a nature of a human being, any action would have the element of fortitude in it. We shall see in the next 3 verses.
Dhritya yaya dharayate.
Dhritya yaya dharayate.
Manah pranendriya kriyaha.
Manah pranendriya kriyaha.
Yogena vyabhicharinya.
Yogena vyabhicharinya.
Dhriti sa partha sattviki.
Dhriti sa partha sattviki.
Dhritya yaya dharayate. Manah pranendriya kriyaha. Yogena vyabhicharinya. Dhriti sa partha sattviki.
Avyabhicharinya, the unswavering, that doesn't shake at all. Dhritya, fortitude. Yaya, by which. Dharayate, holds. Holds what? Kriyaha, the functions of what? Manaha pranendriyaha. Manaha, the mind. Prana, the vital force or the vital force or prana. And indriyaha, the senses. Yogena, by yoga. Sa, that. Dhritihi, dhriti. Sattviki, sattvic, O Partha. So Bhagavan is saying the unswavering fortitude by which one holds the functions of the mind, the vital force which is prana, and the senses by yoga, that dhriti is sattvic, O Partha. Dhritya, dhritya is the fortitude. See, dhriti is another word, like we discussed, what was that? Tapas, right? Like tapas, dhriti is another word which does not have an appropriate English equivalent. We are using fortitude or perseverance, but each of these words, fortitude, perseverance, by themselves, they don't measure up to what dhriti is. Altogether also they don't. See, the best way you can think of explaining dhriti is the power by which constant and consistent vision, constantly there and consistent, because it should not sway, right? Of what? Of the goal is maintained while striving towards it. It is like saying, when the flight is flying and there is turbulence, There is turbulence, but the flight needs to constantly and consistently go towards the destination. So this kind of a constant, consistent vision, maintaining it while striving towards the goal. And also the power that provides the required consistency of purpose, that aspect of why are we doing it, that action is being taken in spite of obstacles. That is a good explanation of dhriti. As you can see, there is no word that can be an equivalent. So the unswavering fortitude, avyabhicharinya dhritya, by which one holds dharayate, the functions of the mind, intellect, which is manaha, the vital force, prana, and the senses, indriya, pranendriya, by yoga, yogena, is sattvika dhriti. Bhagavan uses the term yogena. See, yoga can be interpreted as karma yoga, atma samyama yoga, samadhi abhyasa, bhakti yoga. We have read about all this, huh? Bhakti yoga, and also ashtanga yoga, ayurveda. You know, all of these can be termed as yogena, whatever it may be. Okay, and by whoever is pursuing it, the attitude of worship that leads to unswavering fortitude. So when we are saying unswavering fortitude, where does it come from? It comes from that attitude of worship. That attitude of worship that leads to unswavering fortitude and also enables control over the functions of the mind, the vital force and the senses. Mana, prana, pranendriya. That is yoga. So fixing the mind and intellect on something that is higher, something that is nobler. That is yoga. That is worship. So yoga in this context is worship. And Bhagavan continues.
Yaya tu dharma kamarthan.
Yaya tu dharma kamarthan.
Dhritya dharayate arjuna.
Dhritya dharayate arjuna.
Prasangena phalankankshi.
Prasangena phalakankshi.
Dhriti sa partha rajasi.
Dritissa partha rajasi.
Yaya tu dharma kamarthan. Dhritya dharayate arjuna. Prasangena phalankankshi. Dhriti sa partha rajasi.
Tu, but again, tu is always used in contrast, right? To contrast from what we just learnt in the previous verse. Dhritya, the fortitude. Yaya, by which. Dharayate, holds fast. Dharma, duty. Kama, pleasure. Artha, wealth. So holds fast onto these three. Dharma, kama, arthan. O Arjuna, prasangena, with attachment. Phalakankshi, desirous of the fruits of the actions. Sa, that. Sa dhritihi. Sa dhritihi, that fortitude. O Partha, is rajasi. Rajasi is rajasic. So Bhagavan is saying, but the fortitude by which one holds fast to duty, pleasure and wealth, O Arjuna, with attachment, desirous of fruits of actions. That fortitude is rajasic, O Partha. So the perseverance, dhritya, with which the person holds on fast to duty, dharma is duty here, pleasure, kama, and wealth, artha. Prasangena, with attachment, and phalakankshi, desirous of the fruits. That is the fortitude of rajasika type. See, it is very interesting to note, Bhagavan has covered the purushartha here. Right? Purushartha is human goals. Artha purushartha, kama purushartha, dharma purushartha. He has conveniently omitted or left out moksha purushartha. Okay, so he mentions only the first three. The first three play in the samsaric world, in samsara, in the earthly aspect. Artha, kama and dharma. This is because a rajasika person essentially is working in the other fields of self-effort and does not have moksha as the goal. Such a person will say, I don't know about moksha. I don't care about liberation. I am doing what I am doing. I am doing karma yoga or what. Even if you say spiritually, the person says, I am doing karma yoga. Right? I really don't, moksha is not, I'm not familiar with it. I don't really care about it. It's not my thing. So this is the play, the field of play for a Rajasic person. Artha, Kama and Dharma. Now, if one must be attached, this is for people who have this spiritual path in their mind, right? We have gone through the spiritual path extensively. So for those people, if one must be attached, attachment to Dharma is the best of all. It's like Yudhishthira. Yudhishthira is probably the one who clings to Dharma and no other ulterior motive, without any ulterior motive, just Dharma, for the sake of Dharma. Even accepting Duryodhana's challenge to play dice, gamble, is to uphold the Dharma of a king, which in those days was to accept challenge from another king, from another emperor. Right? So upholding Dharma for the sake of Dharma. Everything else is okay. Right? So, however, this Rajasic person, he is resolutely making efforts. And these resolute efforts are for Kama and Artha. The modes of attaining wealth and pleasure may be different. What we do for it may be different. But the end goal is the same. Such people, they renounce, they work very hard, renouncing food and sleep, renouncing comfort and rest, renouncing love and family, but toiling for wealth and pleasure. Even Dharma is interpreted as goodwill in this life and in the next life and beyond this life. Please note that God, Bhagavan, Sri Krishna, is not talking about Dharma as goodwill. Dharma or goodwill is to be that, celebrated as that person who is knowledgeable, who is a spiritual achiever, who is a saint. So all the entire world will hold this pedestal in a person in a pedestal. Or in day-to-day life also. Hey, this person is a very good human being. The person has goodwill among other people. But here Bhagavan refers to Dharma as what? As duty. We must understand this difference. Dharma as duty is a step towards Sattvic. Dharma as goodwill is purely Rajasic. So when we say that even in this, even when you are making resolute attempt, it is better to be aligned to Dharma. Dharma as duty, not Dharma as goodwill. And at some stage of life, people, realize the ephemeral nature of these goals. And it dawns on them that it is better to start thinking about the Sattvic aspect that we saw in the previous verse. Now Bhagavan comes to the Tamasic Dhriti. Let us see what that is.
Yaya swapnam bhayam shokam
Yaya swapnam bhayam shokam
vishadam madameva cha
vishadam madameva cha
navimunchati dhurmedha
navimunchati dhurmedha
dhriti partha tamasi
Ritissa partha tamasi.
Yaya swapnam bhayam shokam vishadam madameva cha navimunchati dhurmedha dhriti partha tamasi.
Sa, that, Dhritihi, fortitude, Yaya, by which, Durmedha, a foolish person, Na, does not, Vimunchati, abandon, Swapnam, sleep, Bhayam, fear, Shokam, grief, Vishadam, depression, Cha, and Eva, also, Madam, conceit. Dritissa Partha Sarati. So, Tamasi. So, Bhagavan says, such a Dhriti, O Partha, Tamasi, is Tamasic. That fortitude by which a foolish person does not abandon sleep, fear, grief, depression, and also conceit. That is Tamasic, O Partha. The steadiness of purpose with which one does not give up. So see, I was saying in the beginning, right, when we came to Dhriti, that we may think that how can Dhriti be tamasic? Because there is a steadiness of purpose in this also. Dritissa partha tamasi. One does not give up one's dreams and imaginations, fears and agitations, griefs and sorrows, depressions and arrogance. They are not given up. There is a fortitude in that also. Arrogance, stubbornness. That is the dull type or tamasic type of fortitude. So Bhagavan is talking about swapnam. See, swapnam we all understand as dream, right? Here, this term indicates the false, fancied imaginations of the mind, which come up in an almost drowned state of sleep. To see things which are not there, but are delusionally projected in terms of one's own fancy. That is what Swami Chinmayananda says is called a dream. He defines it that way. And I know I'm sticking my neck into this because one of my friends who is listening to this satsang will be having a debate with me on this. Swapna. So when one projects upon samsara, upon our own worldly life, my world, right, our world, the dreamy value of reality, and then puts in labor, puts in effort to convert this false reality into truth when awake. That is a tamasic dhriti, tamasic fortitude. Ravana is a great example, and so is Dhritarashtra. See, Ravana ignored wise counsel even when people told him. His own people, Maricha, okay, who was that one of his warriors who first went to confront Rama. Vibhishana, his own brother. Sukasarna or Sukasavana, I think, I don't remember the name. I have to check this properly. Are his spies. Mayadana, his father-in-law. Mandodari, his wife. And then Kumbhakarna and Indrajit, though they never told him not to, but their death, even after they died, you know, his own biggest strength in terms of his brother and Indrajit, his son who had defeated Indra, they also died, but Ravana stuck to his tamasic ways, delusory ways. And then also the wise counsel of Hanuman and Angad. Hanuman set entire Lanka to fire and told Ravana, I warn you, I, one monkey, Rama's, bhakta, can do this to your state. None of you could stop me. And Angada, he plonked his foot, nobody could move it. But Ravana, in his foolishness, steeped in his own stubborn imagination, the swapnas, he continued. Bhayam is tamasic fortitude that causes fancied fear of the future. It is a fancy. The fear may not be there in future. The fear itself will not be there. But what does it do? This fancied fear, it destroys balance and peace in the present. And then Shokam, Vishadam, Madam. See, Arjuna Vishada Yoga, right? That Vishadam. Grief, Shokam, Vishadam, depression, conceit, Madam. These are also channels of dissipation of human vitality. And this comes from illusion, an illusory way of life. Grief, it's beautifully explained. Grief is the painful feeling arising from the past. Depression is caused by despair for the future. And conceit is vanity of existence in the present. See, the physical blindness of Dhritarashtra is a symbol of lack of discrimination and forethought, arising out of Shokam, Vishadam and Madam. And actually also Bhayam. Dhritarashtra was very scared. He always knew, even as Sanjaya is reciting the Mahabharata to him, Dhritarashtra knows the peril of his sons. So there is that ever-present fear in him. So all these four are there in Dhritarashtra. But steeped in his own delusions, he ignored the wise counsel of Drona, Bhishma, Sanjaya himself, and also that of Sri Krishna. See, the firmness that is born out of these aspects, that is tamasic in nature. Now Bhagavan will take up pleasure or sukham, and its threefold division. And after that, he talks about the duties that arise from human nature. Bhagavan says that no part of creation can be without nature. It cannot be avoided. And what are the duties that come from human nature, from the gunas? We shall say that in the next satsang. Hari Om, Shri Krishna.
We'll repeat today's verses. Chapter 18, 26 to 35. Mukta sango naham vadi mrityutsaha samanvitaha sitya siddhyo nirvikaraha karta satvika uchyate ragi karma phala pripsuhu lubdho himsatmako shuchihi harsha shokanvita karta rajasa parikirtitaha ayukta prakrita stabdaha shato naishkritikulsaha vishadi dirgha sutri cha karta tamasa uchyate buddhir vedam driteshaiva gunatastrividam shrunu prochyamanamasheshena pritatvena dhananjaya pravritim cha nivrittim cha karya karye bhaya bhaye bandham moksham cha ya veti buddhi sa partha satviki yaya dharmam adharmam cha karyam cha karyameva cha ayatavat prajanati buddhi sa partha rajasi adharmam dharmamiti ya manyate tamasavrata sarvartan viparitamscha buddhi sa partha tamasi dhritya yaya dharayati mana pranendriya kriyaha yogena vyabhicharinya dhriti sa partha satviki yaya tu dharma kamarthan dhritya dharayati arjuna prasangena phalankankshi dhriti sa partha rajasi yaya swapnam bhayam shokam vishadam madamiva cha navimunchati durmedha dhriti sa partha tamasi om asato ma sadgamaya tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritam gamaya om purnamada purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate purnasya purnamadaya purnamevavashishyate om shanti 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 harihi om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. You're on mute.
Upasana likes to hear your voice only. Okay, so any thoughts or comments or questions? Diksha is asking, I missed that Hanuman story, where can I find it? So, okay, good question. So, Diksha, yeah, I'll tell you, I don't recollect offhand where, but it's one of the previous, I think twice, two of the previous satsang, we have actually, I referred to that story. I can tell you that story offline if you wish. This is a beautiful question, Dhananjaya. So in 29th verse, Krishna addresses Arjuna as Dhananjaya, and in all the other verses, he is addressing Arjuna as Partha, son of Kunti, or Arjuna, his own name. So why is it that he calls him Dhananjaya? See, the 29th verses, he says that, listen to me as I am going to tell you about the threefold divisions of understanding or knowledge as per, not knowledge, sorry, buddhi, understanding as per the gunas. So he is asking Arjuna to pay attention. About what? About buddhi. Buddhir bedam dritesh chaivam. Sorry, buddhi and dhriti. Now, Dhananjaya, how did, we have seen this earlier, you know, how did Dhananjaya, the name Dhananjaya come to Arjuna? Arjuna, when, you know, he is one who has gathered the wealth of, for the kingdom, for the welfare of the kingdom. So when Yudhishthira was ruling as an emperor and conducted the yajna, see, this jet lag has impact. By the way, what yajna is it called? Rajasuya yajna. Yeah. So Rajasuya yajna is done to establish supremacy among all kings, other kings. And other kings come and say, yes, you are the supreme emperor and we are your subjects. So others are also ruling. But at the same time, they accept, like Britain did, right? Britain spread the quote-unquote commonwealth of, which is under extreme criticism today, which should be criticized, by the way. But yes, that is the Rajasuya, where you propagate your kingship over other smaller kingdoms. And when these other kings come and, you know, pay respect, they share their wealth. And this wealth, a rightful emperor will use it back for the welfare of the people, not to fill his own coffers, by the way. Okay, it is used for the welfare of the people. In the righteous sense, everyone accepts the ruler in the righteous sense as their ruler, and the ruler also practices dharmic ruling in the kingdom. And Arjuna was the one who acquired this wealth for the kingdom of Yudhishthira. That is why his name Dhananjaya. Dhananjaya, the one who wins wealth, Dhana. And Bhagavan is going to talk about Buddhi and Dhriti. This person who won, what is it required for a person to go and win all this allegiance from this various kingdom in a righteous manner, not in a conceited manner, which was later established by the quote-unquote British Commonwealth, right? In a righteous manner. That requires tremendous amount of Buddhi and Dhriti. Without that Buddhi and Dhriti, you cannot acquire that kind of wealth. You cannot become Dhananjaya. So that Dhananjaya is now in this situation where he is saying, I cannot fight. So Bhagavan is basically reminding Arjuna, hey Dhananjaya, please remember, you are the one who will use your Buddhi and Dhriti. Now I am going to tell you about that. That is why he uses this term to address Arjuna, Dhananjaya. Thank you, Jaykar, for that question. Yeah, and yeah, thanks, Upasana. Yeah, you have pointed out the management lessons from Hanuman. I think twice in previous satsang I referred to Hanuman, the crossing ocean and meeting those three quote-unquote demons. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Okay, if nothing else, then thank you, Hari Om. We will meet next Saturday.